Title: The Seat That Changed Everything. The first-class cabin of Horizon Air Flight 717 hummed with quiet opulence. Leather seats gleamed under soft amber lighting. Champagne flutes rested on mahogany trays beside designer handbags. The air carried a sterile calm, luxury wrapped in silence, broken only by the occasional rustle of a newspaper or clink of a crystal glass. And into that space walked a woman who, by all appearances, did not belong. Her name was Lenora Hayes. She wasn't dressed in the sleek black suits or shimmering cashmere wraps typical of those frequenting this skybound lounge of the elite. Instead, she wore a navy blazer over a plain black dress, her heels sensible, her jewelry minimal. Her hair was pulled into a neat low bun, and her face bore no makeup but wore the quiet strength of a woman who had endured and overcome. In her hands was an aging laptop, a worn leather notebook, and a folded speech she had written herself. She was on her way to Geneva, where she would represent the United States at an international conference on human rights. As a sitting member of Congress, her agenda was clear. She was to speak on racial injustice, systemic inequality, and the quiet erasure of identity within American institutions. But right now, she wasn't a congresswoman. Right now, she was just a black woman walking down the aisle of a plane. She reached seat 2A and lowered herself gently, glancing briefly around the cabin. She was barely acknowledged. A woman in oversized sunglasses sipped champagne. A man in a pinstripe suit scrolled through market reports on his iPad. No one knew her name. No one cared to. And that was fine with Lenora. She didn't need recognition. She wasn't here for fanfare. She had booked her ticket, just like everyone else. She had every right to sit in that seat. What she didn't expect, what she could never have prepared for, was the storm that would follow. A flight attendant approached. Her name tag read Rebecca. Her hair was perfectly pinned, her smile as polished as the heels she walked in. "Excuse me, ma'am," she said, polite but clipped. "This seat is generally assigned to our premium members. I'll need to verify your boarding pass." There was no warmth in her voice, no courtesy in her smile, just procedure. Or so it seemed. Lenora reached calmly into her blazer and produced her boarding pass and platinum loyalty card. "Of course," she said simply. Rebecca took the card with the kind of hesitation usually reserved for counterfeit bills. She glanced at it, blinked, then glanced again. Her smile faltered. A flash of something, confusion, maybe disbelief, passed over her face. She handed the card back wordlessly, nodded, and walked away. Lenora thought that was the end of it. She was wrong. Moments later, another woman entered the cabin. Tall, blonde, impeccably dressed in a red designer sheath dress. Her heels clicked assertively down the aisle. Her name was Dana Whitmore, a known face in elite travel circles, a hedge fund executive who prided herself on being a top-tier frequent flyer. Seat 2A had always been hers, not officially, but by entitlement. When Dana saw Lenora in the seat, her lips thinned. She didn't speak at first. She simply stood over the seat, eyebrows arched. "I usually sit here," she said finally, not to Lenora, but to Rebecca, who had rushed back to her side. Rebecca looked between them, flustered. "Ma'am," she said to Lenora, "if you don't mind, perhaps we could relocate you to another comparable seat?" Lenora didn't answer right away. She closed her laptop, looked up slowly. "I reserved this seat," she said. Calm, even, not a flicker of heat in her voice. Dana turned to the other passengers, as if appealing for witnesses. "This is absurd," she said loudly. "I fly this route every week. Everyone knows that's my seat." No one moved. A man 3 rows back looked over his glasses, but said nothing. A woman nearby began discreetly filming with her phone, hiding the lens behind her copy of The Economist. Rebecca leaned closer. "Please," she said under her breath, a nervousness creeping into her tone. "We'd just prefer to avoid a scene." "And what scene do you think I'm about to cause?" Lenora asked, her voice still steady. Rebecca froze. Dana, emboldened by the silence, muttered just loud enough for others to hear. "Some people don't understand boundaries." It was in that moment that Lenora Hayes made a decision. She would not leave the seat. She would not raise her voice. And she would not be erased. What followed was a masterclass in quiet defiance. Rebecca called in the cabin manager, a sharp-shouldered man named Trevor. He arrived with the same rigid posture and practiced neutrality of someone used to dealing with issues. But the moment he looked at Lenora, his gaze hardened. "Ma'am," he said flatly, "I've been informed there's a seating dispute. For the sake of the comfort of our premium passengers, I'm going to ask you to step out into the jet bridge while we sort this out." There it was, the shift. Not "can we speak?" Not "may we verify?" But a directive to leave. To vacate. To disappear. Lenora stood. Not with haste. Not with resistance. But with grace. "If I leave," she said, "I'm not leaving because I'm wrong. I'm leaving so you can ask yourself why you needed me gone in the first place." Trevor didn't reply. Rebecca looked away. Dana smirked, and Lenora walked slowly back through the cabin, every step etched in memory by the eyes that followed her. But what they didn't know, what they couldn't possibly anticipate, was what would come next. That a young passenger seated near the front, barely in her 20s, stood up as Lenora passed. Her hands were trembling. In them, she held a phone. "I recorded everything," she said. Lenora paused. The girl's voice was barely a whisper. "I didn't know what to do, but I couldn't just sit there." She handed the phone to Lenora, and in that moment, something shifted, not just on the plane, but in the story of this country. Because when Lenora disembarked, escorted by security not with force, but with cold indifference, that video had already started to upload. By the time she reached the terminal, it had gone viral. No hashtags. No campaign slogans. Just one line typed by the girl who posted it. "This is what quiet racism looks like." The footage showed everything. Rebecca's unease, Dana's entitlement, Trevor's coldness, and through it all, Lenora's grace. The internet erupted. Within hours, media outlets picked it up. By day's end, the video had been viewed over 5 million times. By morning, it was 50 million. The headlines came fast. Black Congresswoman removed from first-class seat. Despite valid ticket, racism at 30,000 feet. When respect has a skin color, she didn't yell. She just left. And still changed everything. Skylux Airlines was flooded with calls. Their stock dropped 14% in a single day. Protesters gathered outside terminals. Activists called for boycotts. Lawmakers issued statements. And still, Lenora Hayes said nothing. In press conferences. No angry tweets. Just one message, posted from her personal account. Justice doesn't need to shout, but it must be heard. And heard it was. Within 72 hours, Horizon Air's CEO, Darren Whitmore, Dana's cousin, requested an emergency meeting with Representative Hayes. She accepted. The meeting, held at the airline's Manhattan headquarters, wasn't just about an apology. It became the blueprint for change. Lenora didn't ask for anyone to be fired. She asked for reform, mandatory bias training for all airline staff, a review of internal incident response protocols, a public accountability report, a commitment to community hiring practices, and a new internal motto printed at the top of every Horizon Air employee handbook: "The person before the seat." A phrase she had uttered at the end of that first meeting, almost as an afterthought. It stuck. Within a year, incidents of reported discrimination on Horizon flights dropped 67%. Customer satisfaction rose. Rebecca resigned and later published an op-ed titled, "What I Learned from the Woman I Doubted." Trevor retired and now teaches seminars on ethical leadership. Dana faded. And Lenora Hayes? She kept flying. Not because she had to, but because every time she stepped onto a plane, she reminded the world what dignity looked like. It looked like calm. It looked like grace. It looked like a black woman in seat 2A who didn't move. Not because she couldn't, but because she knew that her place was earned, and no one could take that from her. And across the country, thousands of young girls, especially black girls, saw her, not as a victim, not as an exception, but as proof that sometimes the most powerful protest is the one where you simply stay seated.